I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and they, fled and lost their whole families and ended up in displaced persons camps and are, highly traumatized from the Holocaust. And even my aunt, so I'm not even really technically a full third generation. My mom's sister died in a concentration camp. So my mom was lucky enough to be born in the United States. My mom met my dad in Canada, and I grew up with a very clear understanding that it was only because of people who fought for justice that my grandparents were saved and brought over to the United States by being sponsored by friends of friends coming to Peoria, Illinois, and being able to start their life. So my understanding of why oppression is able to lead to the mass murder of people is through the funding by state apparatus that allow those things to happen. And so when I look at the history and the trajectory of anti-Semitism, which allowed the killing of my family, I see exactly to your point, the creation of Israel and the massive amount of funding backed by both Britain and then the US, and now really global superpowers everywhere, to say that this is a state that is allowed to do absolutely anything that it wants in the name of, quote unquote, Jewish safety or fighting anti-Semitism, that just replicates the kind of violence that we all fled from. And so the connection that I see is that Ashkenazi Jews, specifically in the West, were able to come into whiteness, be welcomed into whiteness, be closer to power, to get to what they thought was safety, what we thought was safety, right? We're going to become more like white people. We're going to become more normal. We're going to be, assimilate into American society. And that's going to be our ticket away from these violent histories. And, Israel is going to be the primary place that makes this happen. We're going to get away from the vision of that really weak, Yiddish Jew, and we're going to become this masculinized, Israeli, white, like big, buff, modern man Jew, and no one's ever going to do that to us again. And that cozying up to whiteness, that closeness to whiteness, that closeness to empire, to imperial power, then allows a state funding of a kind of, impunity that we've really rarely seen before. And I think it's important that we actually debunk it, pull it apart, say that, most of this doesn't have to do with anti-Semitism anymore. It's an imperial project, and that Jews have to identify the difference between real anti-Semitism, like you said, that has historical and painful roots, deeply connected to white supremacy, and then criticism of the state of Israel and their absolute, death cult, destruction of Palestine and the Palestinian people. And so it felt very important to me personally to say, I have a stake in that as well, because my own history is tied up in that narrative.